Welcome into an all-new betting preview for this week's Genesis Scottish Open. I'm Rick Gaiman, that right there. Andy Lack. Andy, let's go. Adjust the clocks, change our schedules a little bit. 2 weeks overseas.
Yeah, I would say, we're both early risers, right? So personally, I love this. I love the concept of being able to watch golf from, say, 6 a.m. to noon, and then maybe being able to play golf in the afternoon. This is my perfect viewing schedule as it pertains to watching golf.
Yeah, it's awesome. I agree. If it's dark in the morning and I'm watching golf, like that's the perfect place to be, sipping coffee on the couch, all that fun stuff. We've got not an elevated event, but with the field that we have, it feels a little bit like it, or at least the top end does, for the Scottish Open this week. And then because it is co-sanctioned, Andy, you do get a situation where like half of this field is basically made up from guys that normally reside on the ZP World Tour. So there are a lot of things to kind of consider for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're basically getting most of, outside of the live players and probably Rahm, you're getting a pretty good vantage point on most of the big names this week, with a little bit of links form. Although, we can talk about the nuances between the Renaissance Club and what we're going to have at Hoylake in 2 weeks' time. But I love the fact that we're getting to see Scheffler, Rory, Hovland, all of these guys playing at least a modern lengths, but certainly in Scottish, British conditions a week before a major championship. And this is an event, I think it becomes difficult for us from a data standpoint to project out. These are two of the most challenging weeks of the year for probably guys like you and I, just in terms of the stark contrast that this style of golf asks of you versus what these guys are faced with week to week on the PGA Tour. But that still makes for a really fun and exciting change of pace. I guess, are you less data dependent on weeks like this? Do you consider this more of a feel week, or do you feel pretty comfortable using all the tools that we have at our disposal to be able to project performance on such a different style of golf that's so dependent more so on conditions?
I am admittedly less data driven, or at least I don't take it as seriously this week in particular, right? I think that because it is an event that's only been played at this golf course for 4 years, because we've only injected the PGA Tour guys into it for 1 year, and because it is so dependent on what the weather is going to do, you add all that up and it makes it very difficult to just bend the knee to the data, right? This is not TPC River Highlands every summer in Connecticut, and we know what we're going to get. This is not Augusta National. Like this is about as chaotic as it gets. And I think you have to use a little bit of your gut, maybe hedge in some spots, find some more well-rounded golfers, try to just, I don't want to say guess, but accurately predict what is going to happen, even if the numbers point to something different.
Right. And the one thing I remember when I went to Ireland late last year in September, it became a bit of a running joke in our group that whatever the weather forecast said, it turned out to be the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Right. So, projecting out weather conditions of how this course is going to play as we record this on Tuesday morning might turn out to be a fool's errand. But have you looked at the weather at all yet this week? And do you think that we're going to see something closer? Because I think this really probably depends a lot on how you handicap this course. Do you think we're going to see something closer to Xander winning at 7 under, or somebody, 3 guys getting to 22 under like we saw in 2019?
Probably more towards the latter.
I agree, by the way. Yeah.
My understanding is it's been quite wet there. There is at least some moisture or precipitation, might not be a lot, in the forecast every single day. I think that the wind, again, yeah, trying to predict the wind 5 days out is insane in Scotland. But the forecast has it be, like there's going to be like 15-mile-an-hour wind every day, but Sunday is going to seemingly be the gustiest. So I think all things considered, it will probably be more of a receptive, I don't want to say birdie fest, but closer to the low scores than Xander's winning year.
I would agree. And the other thing that I would mention with that too is that last year they changed the par from a par, a par 71 to a par 70.
Mhm.
So, even those years when it was 22 under, it was really kind of like 18 under. And last year, if you remember as well, there was a crazy wave advantage where one entire wave basically got wiped out with brutal conditions based on the other wave that was able to see a more benign golf course, which makes me think that probably we're going to see something closer to the middle, right? Like I don't think that we're going to get as extreme conditions as what we saw last year. I also think that with the par changing, you're not even in benign conditions going to see three guys shoot 22 under again. So if I had to guess, it probably turns closer into maybe the Aaron Rye 11 under year, right? Something along those lines. And, still has me looking at sort of a combination between, guys that do have some links experience and do have some a pretty good track record in difficult and challenging scoring conditions. But I would still be very shocked if we saw as much carnage as we did last year in the Xander year.
Well, here is the betting board. This is from Odds Checker. It's a grid that you can check out the best available odds across the industry. And I have not made a bet yet, Andy. We'll start with that. I'm going to wait as long as possible because of what we've been talking about and keeping an eye on it. But let's talk through these names. The favorite, Scotty Scheffler 7-1, Rory McIlroy 9-1. Both Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele are at 14. Both Tyrrell Hatton and Victor Hovland are at 18. And then you get Ricky Fowler back in the mix at 20-1. That is the top of the board.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a bit frustrated to see these many names below 20-1. I guess this is a fairly top heavy field when you consider the fact that there's more back end DP World Tour players in this field than what we're used to regularly seeing on the PGA Tour. But I probably, if I had to choose a name in the below 20 range, I do like Patrick Cantlay a lot this week, who continues to play some excellent golf. I wish the number was closer to 16 or, kind of what we're seeing for him early next week at the Open Championship, where he's as high as 25 or 26. But it's very hard for me to believe that the guy still hasn't won this season the way that he's driving the ball right now. He did finish fourth at this golf course last year. And I just feel like it's coming for him. I think it's coming pretty soon for Cantlay. I still, again, struggled with the 14 and found myself starting from the pure outright bets that I made. I found myself starting in that 20 range with Hatton and Fleetwood.
Yeah, there's kind of a little bit of an overlap between some of the guys that I like in the 9K range on DraftKings and kind of the next tier of golfers. I looked at a lot of these, right? 14-1 on Cantlay and Xander. I was like, no, I don't think so. Hatton at 18-1, like, has my interest a little bit, but like, God, these are all kind of tough triggers. So I haven't made a bet yet, but I am kind of looking in this range. So Fleetwood at 22, both Spieth and Fitzpatrick at 25, Minwoo Lee at 35, along with Shane Lowry. I'm looking at Matt Fitzpatrick here, I think is probably where my first click will go. But how do we assess kind of the next tier?
Well, I'll group in Hatton. I mean, although Hatton now, it seems like he's been hit heavily hard, I'm seeing 16 and 18 on that grid. I was able to grab a 24 on him. He's probably my favorite along with Fleetwood. The way that Hatton's been playing this year,
Yeah.
he's done just about everything but be the last man standing on Sunday. I mean, this guy has turned from a really great putter and a very solid iron player to basically one of the most well-rounded players in the game right now.
Mhm.
And you look at the ball striking numbers, he's gained strokes ball striking every single start this season. He's gained over a stroke putting in 7 straight starts. One thing that jumped out to me about the Renaissance Club, especially in the wind, one thing that many people underrate is when we talk about windy conditions, we often talk far more about ball striking. gosh, it is really, you have to be such a solid putter
Yeah.
on inside 10 feet in the wind. That was one thing I really noticed in Ireland is like in those windy conditions, you need to be so rock solid inside 5 to 10 feet. And the Renaissance Club last year, the statistics back this up as well, was the most difficult golf course to putt on inside, basically inside 10 feet on the entire PGA Tour schedule. I I just trust Hatton's putter right now, and I think that Hatton of the elite players probably has the best outside of maybe Cantlay, has the best combination of trustable ball striking and trustable putting. And I think that well-rounded style of play is probably the safest bet, in my opinion, for a golf course like this, where he could win this tournament at 15 under and he could win this tournament at 3 under. And I would feel equally strong about both outcomes.
I'm glad you mentioned the well-roundedness of Terrell Hatton is what was appealing, because that's kind of why I was looking at Matt Fitzpatrick, right? You know, someone who is, no matter how this plays out, and we might not understand how this is going to play out, is able to contend. And then I throw in the fact that his course history here is basically the best course history you can get: T6, T2, T42, and a 14th place finish. He's played it each of the last 4 years. Like I'm excited about, because I agree with you, that well-rounded nature, also the ability to get up and down. Like, you're going to probably miss a lot of greens around this place, right? Especially in windy conditions and shots coming from, 175 yards and out. Like, I agree with you that well-rounded Hatton, Fitzpatrick, you can even throw a little bit of Tommy Fleetwood into the mix as well. That's the style of golfer I think I'm looking for this week.
I want two quick 30-second hitters on two guys I just want to touch on really quickly before we get into the next range. Hovland and Spieth. And I think I like both of those guys. Maybe I think Hovland might win at Hoylake next week, or in 2 weeks' time, I should say. So we may be a week earlier. But where do you assess? I mean, the guy was in the final group last year at St. Andrews. I think this is a pretty markedly different golf course to St. Andrews. But the discipline that I've seen out of Hovland's game, most recently at Oak Hill and Muirfield Village, where I felt like there was a bit of a transformation in shot selection with Hovland, and I noticed him playing far more similar to the style of play that we see out of Brooks Koepka at majors than maybe the gunslinging style of play that Hovland employed in his early days. To me, that style of play is going to translate incredibly well to links golf. So I was just curious on your take on both Hovland and Spieth real quick before we start talking about some of the 30s and 40s on these guys.
So they're both interesting, but I think for kind of different reasons, right? So yes, and Victor has talked about like being a little bit less aggressive and just giving himself more opportunities to the center of the green instead of trying to take on every single pin. And then when you miss a pin on the short side, like even a professional golfer who misses any golfer who misses the pin on the short side, it's like a half a stroke worse than missing it on the long side, right? Like it's just bad. And if you don't have a great short game, it's even worse. So the question about Victor is, how much do you think driving matters, right? Because I think that he separates himself on golf courses where long and straight matters. Now, I think long helps everywhere. Straight here is a little bit subjective, right? Because the rough is not super penal, but you can't miss big, right? So how important is long and straight this week? Because I think that drives a lot of the stuff where does Victor separate himself?
Less important than Hoylake. And that's why I like him a lot better at Hoylake than I do here. And I'm actually selfishly hoping that Victor not necessarily flames out, shows us something.
It's like
but
T21, right? Just like,
just to give us a T21. Show us that you're comfortable on these type of turf conditions, comfortable with a little win, but don't make enough noise that we're staring at you at 14-1 next week at Hoylake. I would agree with you. I think that this golf course, there's room off the tee here, and it featured one of the lowest missed fairway penalties on the PGA Tour. And it kind of almost created a situation where, I mean, I saw basically zero correlation last year in terms of 8 of the top 15 guys on the leaderboard last year lost to the field in driving accuracy. Right. But you did see a lot of bombers populate the leaderboard. And that is what tends to happen on a golf course where last year the driving accuracy percentage was 48.9%. Sometimes, the most accurate guys tend to lose their advantage on setups like that. And we could see that again this week, which maybe that plays into the guy you have pulled up right now in
Right.
Jordan Spieth.
Yeah, perfect segue, right? You have the ability to miss a little bit off the tee, and then if it turns into a second shot / short game creativity competition, this is the guy I want in my corner, right? Where I've got his Open Championship and Scottish Open history up. He's only played the Scottish Open once. It was last year. He finished T10. But I mean, look at this run of Open Championships, and obviously they're all different. But T8, T10, T8 runner up, T20, T9 win. That goes back to Birkdale. I just think that, and he's talked about this as well, the link style golf being able to unlock a little bit of a different side of his brain is really, really good for Jordan Spieth. So he's at 25-1. I think they're both pretty interesting, but for different reasons.
Yeah. And again, like if you're talking about a golf cart, and not that Spieth has actually been driving the ball really well this year. I know that his performance at LACC was fairly disappointing, and we haven't seen him since then. But to gain, almost 6 strokes off the tee at Oak Hill,
Yeah.
and do that again at the Memorial, Spieth has picked up some distance. He doesn't get talked about as a long player because compared to the other peers that are typically in his price range, he's never going to have Rory distance or Rahm distance or Scheffler distance or Hovland distance, but Spieth's not short either. So I think if you're looking at a golf course where you want some power off the tee, you're ready to be a little bit more lenient on accuracy, but that short game continues to be incredibly important. And obviously the putter with Spieth is always a question mark, can be really great, can be really poor. I think he's absolutely intriguing at 25-1.
I will likely live with a small card in that general vicinity, whether it is Hatton, Fitzpatrick, someone else, and that's it. I don't know, but let's go a little bit further. Outside, 50s, you get to the Justin Roses, Ludwig Aberg, Justin Thomas is hanging a 50 out there right now. If we are getting outside that top tier and tier B, where do we go?
Well, this is a player that I normally he's not typically part of my betting. This is not a guy that I'm on too much, but I really like the 55 on Sam Burns this week. He's finished top 20 at this golf course before. We talk about putting inside 10 feet, putting on slow greens. Burns has one of the most trustable putters in the game, in my opinion. I think the number's really fair too. I mean, this is a guy that wins a lot of golf tournaments to be priced at 55-1. You want to talk about, Tom Doak, who designed the Renaissance Club. Well, Sam Burns has 2 top 7 finishes in his last 2 appearances at the only other Tom Doak designed golf course on the PGA Tour, which is Memorial Park, which, I would never compare a Texas golf course to a Scottish golf course, but that one does get pretty firm and fast, was designed by the same guy, has similar green complexes, and it can get a bit breezy that time of year in Texas as well. So for me, I thought the 55-1 on Sam Burns is definitely one that I'm biting on.
I had a dream that he won the Open Championship a couple nights ago. That's sick. I never remember my dreams. The only other golf related dream that I remember is one week I had a dream that Keegan Bradley was 66-1 and he won the golf tournament. And I bet it at like 80-1 and he missed the cut. That's the only other dream I've had that is golf related, but I did have a dream that Sam Burns won the Open in 2 weeks.
And, he's probably live at Liverpool as well. I'd like to see how he performs this week, obviously. And I might like him a little bit more this week than next week, just based on the lack of major success. But there are a lot of guys that, like, I talked about this in a podcast that I just did with Steve Bamford that'll come out, maybe tomorrow or the next day. But we've started to see recently where talent is almost starting to be a bigger needle mover these days than links form, right?
Yeah.
And we've had all of these years at the Open Championship where it was these crafty, wily veterans that are the guys that and it's sacrilegious to ever pick a young up and comer United States player as a guy to win on a links golf course if they've never played links golf courses before. Well, we're starting to see the times change and the needle shift to talent trumps all, right? How do you explain Colin Morikawa winning an Open in his first appearance? How do you explain Cameron Young, growing up on Westchester tree-lined golf courses and then playing his first Open and finishing second at St. Andrews, right? So a lot of these guys that you might normally say, oh, they don't have the links experience that we're hoping for. Well, guess what? Turns out that if you're really good at golf, you're just really good at golf.
Yeah, amazing how that works. I will be loading up finishing positions, matchup markets, guys like the following: Alex Smalley, who's flushing right now, I find interesting. And I also think that there's going to be a lot of the guys who normally reside on the DP World Tour being mispriced or overlooked or not understanding the state of their game, like Jordan Smith. He's 125 to 1. Alexander Bjork's been unreal on the DP World Tour. Some of these other guys, I think like Langesk is how you pronounce that, at 250 to 1. Again, not for outright markets, Andy, but I think there's a lot of inherent value in these guys that are generally playing on the DP World Tour.
Yeah. I mean, I would throw out Ryan Fox as well, who can't be found at as an appealing of a number as some of the guys that you mentioned. But Fox is a guy that's played great on links courses, has shown a lot of top end ability on the DP World Tour. He's been less impressive this season than he has the season prior. But I do think a lot of those guys that are used to playing conditions that are far more similar that we're going to get, even a guy, and this is, I guess he's more of a PGA Tour guy than a DP World Tour guy, but he kind of doubles as both. Alex Noren is a guy that's starting to play a lot better golf, has had a lot of success at tournaments like the Dunhill and on this golf course before. You see those approach numbers are starting to get back to some pretty enticing levels. So Fox and Noren would kind of be the guys that I'm looking at a little bit farther down the board.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, remember, he finished runner-up at the DP World Tour Championship at the end of last year. He lost the driver.
Yeah, lost it.
But outside of that, I mean, it's kind of coming back. And outside of that, if he can just keep it in play, the rest of his game is stout enough to get the job done. But that's absolutely lost it. Okay. Matchups here. So I already mentioned it. I'm going to go deep down the board and try to find some of the less marquee matchups. Some of the interesting ones at the top of the board: Rory McIlroy, a pretty significant dog at plus 160 to Scotty Scheffler. Matt Fitzpatrick and Terrell Hatton, I'll probably not touch that because I like both of those guys. But Rosie versus JT, that's how far JT has fallen in kind of the eyes of the sports books.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, gosh, man, I mean, I have always in theory liked JT on link style of golf courses, even though the results haven't really backed that up whatsoever. This feels like it's got to be an inflection point for Justin Thomas at some point, but I also feel like we've been saying that for weeks now. I still guess we're part of a wait and see approach with him. But yeah, I mean, I'm probably looking like for example, if you're giving me Scheffler over McIlroy, I'll probably take that. I mean, Tom Kim over Sungjae, that's another. You see the Ludwig Sam Burns one, that's another one I probably have some interest in.
Yeah.
But there's some interesting ones farther down the board. That's a tough one, Fleetwood Hatton, that I'd probably stay away from because I really like both of them.
Yannick Paul plus money to Benny on. I will very much bet that. Yannick Paul's good. Benny sprays. Yannick Paul was like global golfer. That's shameful. That is shameful that he is plus 130 to Benny on's minus 130. Okay. Let's talk about one and done. We'll recap our standings from last week. But first, we are going to take a quick break and reset on the other side.
Andy Lack is one of the nerdiest golf guys that I know, and I mean that as an absolute compliment. His knowledge of course architecture allows him to create some of the most actionable course previews available, and he offers up pure expertise on his own podcast, the Inside Golf Podcast. Twice a week, he offers course breakdowns, DFS, and betting strategy for every PGA Tour event, and he expands the universe by bringing on entertaining and knowledgeable guests who can offer a different viewpoint of the game that we love. Follow Inside Golf Pod on Twitter and download Inside Golf wherever you download podcasts.
And we're back, Andy, real quick. One bet to make it Barbasol. Only one. You only get one bet. What are you making? You're going to say Akshay at 28-1.
Yeah, probably either Akshay or Peter Quest.
I like Peter Quest's game a lot.
Yeah, he's good. Peter Quest might be really good, honestly. But yeah, probably Akshay. We're not that I don't need it, but we'll refrain from one and done for Barbasol.
Please, yes. Last week, Chris Kirk for you, Denny McCarthy for me. I got 218. You got 84. So I'm at 9.4 million. You're at 6.4 million. So $3 million between here and I was going to say Eastlake, but not even Eastlake, the BMW Championship, which is in Chicago. So work to do, my friend. Options for this week, because it's weird. It's a pretty stacked field, but it's not an elevated event. It's like a $9 million purse or $9.5 million purse. So strategically, what caliber of golfer are you kind of looking to roll out here?
Well, I have a plan. I mean, I'm at the point where I've pretty much utilized most of my big names, and if I have one big name remaining, I'm probably more inclined to deploy them at Hoylake. But man, 17% Tommy Fleetwood, huh? Yeah. I guess I would have thought that he would have been more used up by now.
Me too.
But yeah, that's surprising. But I would imagine that of that top four, like, wouldn't you say that probably most guys still have one of Lowry, Hatton, Fitzpatrick, or Fleetwood? And if you have one of that group, it seems like that's what people are doing this week.
Yep. Go get yourself. I mean, this is kind of what you talked about, right? Like staying away from young Americans, or like staying away from Americans in general, right? Fleetwood, Fitzpatrick, Hatton, Lowry. People say they go overseas. I have one of these guys available. They're close enough to the top of the betting board. I'll just take one of them. So if you play like any American, you are going to be by your side. I mean, Victor, I guess I'd be saving Victor, but like I'm trying to think here. I mean, Ricky, I guess, is chasing a little bit. And you don't have to go too far down the board here if you want to be a little bit different.
I wouldn't even play like a Kitayama. I mean, I guess maybe the deepest I would go would be Minwoo.
Yeah.
Maybe. Although, you're not even getting like a 1% Minwoo. I think a lot, and Minwoo's overpriced this week, objectively, in my opinion, both in DraftKings and in the betting market. So he's probably still going to get enough love. But my guess is that worst case scenario, I don't think you have to roll out somebody worse than a Tom Kim, right? Maybe Adam Scott.
I think if I'm front running, I take either Fleetwood or Fitzpatrick. If I'm making up ground, I take either Hatton or Lowry and just deal with the consequences later. It's not like it's a huge amount of money. You'll be a little bit different, and you don't have to burn Spieth. You don't have to burn Victor if you have them. You don't have to burn Xander. I think that's the play.
Yeah, I would agree. I
will take Tommy Fleetwood.
That was my guy. Okay. All right. I need to audible here. I will probably go with, did I use Fitzpatrick then?
No, you should be good. Okay. You can use him.
Yeah, I'll use Fitzpatrick then. And I feel pretty good about that. And maybe I'll end up using Tommy at Hoylake, who's, I guess, 16-1 at Hoylake now. So
you want to trade? I'll take Fitzpatrick, you take Tommy. I kind of like better.
You have Fitzpatrick available? Yeah. I mean, that would maybe be more sensible because I'm betting Fleetwood and you're betting Fitzpatrick.
All right, let's just trade. How about that? This is going to be horrible when Fleetwood wins this golf tournament. It's going to be absolutely horrible.
I'll happily roll with Tommy in this spot. I like him a lot.
All right. You are now on Tommy. I'm on Matt Fitzpatrick. I think they are both great options, by the way. I've got really no concern about that, but oh boy, this is a little bit nervy now. All right. Get your coffee ready, adjust your sleep schedule. We are going overseas. This time next week, we will be doing a show for the Open Championship, which is absolutely wild. Lots of great content coming from Andy along the way. You can follow him on Twitter at ADP Lack Sports, and you can find me at RickRunGood. This has been your betting preview for this week's Scottish Open. Good luck.